Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I recently read the first volume of The Witcher called House of Glass, so I thought today I would share my thoughts with you. This comic is written by Paul Tobin and the artwork is by Joe Querrio. I picked this up at Comic Con recently and I haven't yet read any of the books from the Witcher series or played any of the video games because this comic is either based on the books or the video game. I don't really know actually if there's much difference between the two. But yeah, I wasn't familiar with the Witcher world, but I knew that was fantasy. That was pretty much all I knew about it, and I knew the name of the main character, but I think that was all. But this was actually a really accessible comic if you're not familiar with the Witcher world. The main character Geralt is a witcher and you learn like a tiny bit about what it means to be a witcher, but not really that much, but it doesn't feel that relevant for the story. I don't feel like there was more that I really needed to know to understand the story, but at the same time I learned enough that I kind of got interested to know more about what it's like to be a witcher, so that's definitely something that I'll look forward to learning more about when I read more of the comics or maybe the books or the video games, because after reading this comic I definitely got interested in the Witcher world. The only reason that I picked this up at Comic Con was the title, The Witcher. Normally when I look through comics my intention is grabbed by the cover because often they have a really nice cover, but often I'm also kind of disappointed then because then I flip through the comic and I realise actually that the artwork on the cover is much nicer than the artwork inside. But with this one that actually was the reverse. I'm not a huge fan of the way that the cover looks, but I do really like the artwork inside because this is kind of a darker fantasy story, and definitely like the artwork reflects that really well. It really fits with the atmosphere of the story. The colours really are kind of like dark and really go with this dark fantasy theme, but also the artwork, I think for other stories I don't always enjoy this type of artwork, but for this story it works really well, and because often I don't really like it when faces of people are a bit vague and you can't really make out like all the details, but here it seemed kind of fitting that you weren't always able to read someone's face. I actually liked it, but yeah, I really liked the artwork. There was also there's a lot of stained glass images, which was a really cool element to the artwork and probably my favorite element actually. So the story is about Geralt of Rivia, who is a witcher, and he is like traveling alone and comes across this hunter who is called Jacob, and they share a meal and Jacob tells him that his wife has died but that she still kind of hunts him and has now become a Bruxae, which is kind of a vampire, something like that. And then they travel on together and they go into a forest, and in this forest they come across a mysterious house. So the rest of the story really revolves around this house and the mystery it holds, and I really like this whole mysterious atmosphere. I love fantasy, but I really like that this was a darker fantasy. Like, I'm not a huge fan of horror per se, but like when fantasy is a little bit darker I do sometimes really enjoy it, and for this story it worked really well, and I really liked the whole mysterious house, and I really liked that like it really created a sense of suspense. It was a very like atmospheric story, and I also really liked all the creatures we encountered because like they weren't really the standard fantasy type creatures like dragons or elves or whatnot. Like I do also enjoy stories about those, but it was just nice to come across like creatures that I'd never heard of. I don't know if they're invented for this story, but also like some creatures that I have heard of but just don't often feature in fantasy stories. What made this story very accessible was that I think only the main character Geralt is a recurring character as far as I know. Like the other characters really seemed just to be there for this particular story, so that also made it maybe a little bit easier because I didn't feel like I needed to know lots of backstory between like the characters, like their relationship or anything like that. What I also really liked is that this first volume is like a complete adventure, so it does have a like ending at the end, and I really like that. There's definitely room for like more adventures, but it's nice when you read a volume that you do really feel like you've actually finished a storyline. In his first volume you learn like a tiny bit about Geralt, like not that much honestly, but it's enough again to really get me curious. Like you just learn that he's a bit of a loner maybe, and I don't know, he seems a bit mysterious. He seems to know more about what's going on than he's letting on, and I really like that, and I am definitely looking forward to learning more about him. What I also really liked was that at some point there was a twist that I didn't see coming. That's always a really good thing, because so many comics I feel like I can already predict what's happening, or I feel like the story isn't really going anywhere, but that wasn't the case with this one. I really enjoyed it. In general, I can't really think of anything that I didn't like about it. I did give it 4 stars on Goodreads, not 5, but it's just like, I think I rarely give books or comics 5 stars, honestly. Then they have to be amazing and the story has to stay with me for a really long time, I guess, books like that. But that was the case with this one, but I definitely really enjoyed it. I would really recommend it if you want to read a darker fantasy story, and also if you're not familiar with the Witcher stories, this one is definitely a good one to pick up anyway. I'm definitely going to pick up the next volume, and I'm also going to plan on reading the first book in the Witcher series, or maybe even play the video game, but I feel like my brother said that was quite difficult. Maybe like I'm not very good at video games, so I don't know, maybe it's doable for most people, but it might be a little bit difficult for me, I guess. I don't know, but I might try that as well. If you've also read this comic, let me know your thoughts, and also let me know if you've played the video games or the books, how you feel like these two compare to the comic. I'd love to know that, and maybe I'll see you in my next video. Bye!